some people on my board and Heather McMahon, who we introduced you to. So everybody, welcome. Some of you come here week after week, and so you've heard me do this introduction again many times. But I'll just, for those people, if it's your first time, just remind you why we're meeting and what we do here. And we started meeting on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock. Team with the Dean. It was meant to be tea with the Dean, but as I tell people, Amy doesn't understand my accent, so it became Team with the Dean. And we originally started in the spring just to keep ourselves connected as a community, and then a small group of us kept meeting in the summer, faculty and students. And frankly, I mean, I was running some task forces at the time. I find it immensely useful just having the ability to connect and talk and discuss some issues. And so we decided we'd keep this going in the fall, but actually revolve it around another theme. We can still keep connected, and we do this, but around a theme that's very important for the business school, and that is, what is the nature of business post-COVID-19? And so, I mean, this is tremendously important, obviously for the faculty, because we want to be teaching what's relevant. And it's obviously important for students because, you're progressing your career. You probably want to get some clues about where's the places you should be focused on. But it's important also for us to do this together because, this is not something that's just going to happen to us. We're actors in this, and we have a chance actually to shape this. And so in order to do this, we invite a guest to join us, and I'm going to introduce our guest tonight in a second. We're going to record this evening's session with Dr. Draper's permission, and the way we do this, if you haven't been here before, Dr. Draper and I, we're going to talk I'm going to introduce her, and then we're going to talk for about 15-20 minutes maybe, and then we're going to split into groups, little groups. It'll be totally mixed. There's no status here, and so you'll be totally mixed, as you know. And invite you to discuss this question: business post COVID-19. Come back with questions or things you want to discuss with the speaker, and then we end up the last 20 minutes having a discussion about these topics. So that's how we do it. And so I'm tremendously pleased to have Dr. Draper. We had this discussion before. I think you're comfortable with us calling you Toni Draper, okay? Toni has really been an influential community leader in native Baltimore for decades, and then, by the way, that was also why it was important to have Toni join us tonight, because in our series before, we've gone a lot of places so far, and I really wanted to have a session that was very grounded in Baltimore. And so I thought, who better than a community leader like Toni, who's had leadership positions in journalism, church she founded, and also in education. So in February 2018, Toni was named chairman of the board and publisher of the AFRO-American Newspapers, which was founded in 1892 by her great-grandfather. She was actually president of the company from 87 to 99. We're going to talk quite a bit about the AFRO and what it stands for and what it's doing, what's developed, and what happened in the pandemic as well. Toni received a bachelor's degree in Spanish language education from Morgan State University and was on the university's board of regents for 25 years. I think you just stepped down last June. She also has a master's degree in education from Johns Hopkins and pastoral counseling from Loyola University in Maryland, doctorate in ministry in preaching and leadership from the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. And this is really important. Just these credentials itself make you among the smartest people in Baltimore. But what really rounds us off is that Toni has an MBA from the University of Baltimore, which, you remember, students, we already established this, didn't we? That it qualifies you as one of the smartest people on the planet. So Toni has served on the boards of National Newspaper Publishers Association, the Y in Central Maryland, Fellowship of Christian Athletes in Baltimore City, the advisory board of Results Baltimore. She's also a member of the Executive Alliance. I'm going to quote something that was in, I think, the Daily Record about a year ago. She told the Record that her mother, Frances Murphy II, encouraged her to honor God, treat people the way you want to be treated, and surround yourself with younger people who can keep you up to date on the latest trends and technologies. Now, you know, I think, you know, this is a great forum we've got a lot of young people, and by the way, a lot of young at heart people as well. So this is a great opportunity to learn from you and to discuss. So welcome.
Thank you.
So maybe just a little bit, it would be useful so everybody, you know, I hope that people are familiar with the AFRO, and if you're not, I really would encourage you to get on there and take out a subscription. But so I'm also your publicist today. But maybe you could say just a little bit about, you know, just so everybody's up to speed on just some of the just some of the basics about the AFRO, and, you know, circulation, how many times you go to press, really the basics around the business, and then we'll kind of dive into talking about the business a little bit. Then we'll move into talking a little bit about Baltimore as well.
Okay, well, we'll start there. First, let me say hello to everyone. Good afternoon to my good friend, Kurt Schmoke. We go way back, and we're not even going to talk about how long, because we'll be here for a while. To the Dean of the Business School, so glad to see you again. And to everyone who's on this call. This is a special group of people, President Schmoke, anybody that would get on a Zoom call at 4 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, when I know that you're probably working, juggling work. Some of you are juggling, right? Remote learning with kids. Anybody have kids? You're doing some remote learning, and you're juggling school and you're juggling work, and it's 4 o'clock on Tuesday. Kudos to you. Let me say thanks to Amy for helping to set up a lot of this. And some of you may know the AFRO story, and you may not know. I'm gonna try to give you the elevator speech. That's the 60-second speech, but it was founded in 1892 by my great-grandfather, John Henry Murphy Sr., at the age of 52 years old, when reportedly less than 2% of the Black population could read. He was a formerly enslaved man. I had served in the Civil War. I had reached the rank of sergeant, and was a pressman for a small printing press run by two preachers here in Baltimore, who were better preachers than they were publishers. And so the family legend says that he borrowed $200 from my great-grandmother to buy, the name was already in existence, Afro-American, and the printing press. The men in the family say that's not quite the way it went. They were married, and she didn't, it was his money. What was her money was his money. So, you know, nobody was there to dispute that one way or the other, but nonetheless, it was purchased in 1892, and he had 10 children. My grandfather was one of those 10. Some of you may be familiar with Billy Murphy. Billy Murphy's grandfather was one of the 10. And so we have deep Baltimore roots. And the paper grew over the years to become 13 editions at one time with our own printing press, and 250 employees. And, you know, we just did what we do, told the story from the African-American perspective. So that's a little bit of the history. I skipped a whole lot of the history. When the men went to war in the Second World War, the women went to work. And so it's been, there are now six generations. I'm fourth generation. There are 2 generations behind me that are involved with the paper, at least some representation from the 5th and the 6th generation. So I'm gonna stop there. I can keep going and tell you that today we have, yes, a print product we do once a week, a very robust social media presence with nearly 700,000 Facebook followers, about 10,000 IG followers. We hope that you will like us on IG right now, to Afro News, Twitter followers as well. And so we do that. And then we just opened our TikTok account. Somebody's trying to show me how to do that, but you know, I don't have that perfected yet. You don't see any of that up, but very robust. We do 2 weekly shows, one called The Chicken Box and one called Family Biz on Facebook Live. We do a lot of lives, a lot of engagement, and I'm just glad to be here on this afternoon.
So how did we'll talk a little bit about newspapers and publishing business in general, but maybe the way to get into that is actually getting straight into this discussion about, how the pandemic affected the Afro and what you had to do, or had you do anything to react to that.
I'm sure I don't have to tell business students that the newspaper industry, if you will, has been pivoting long before the pandemic. Pandemic just kind of pushes you over the edge, right? To do the things that you thought about doing as you've watched print circulation decline and advertising revenue decline, but not the thirst and hunger for local news. A lot of times we get fed national news, all of us do, and we keep up with that, but people still want to know what's happening in my community. What's is somebody writing about my kid's little league game, or what's happening with my social club, or what's happening in my grad school at the University of Baltimore. So we've been thinking about pivoting some things anyway. That word pivot, haven't we worked that word? We've worked that word pivot, right. Pivot and reimagine. We've worked those words until we can't work them any longer. However, the pandemic pushed us to do one thing that we thought about doing, and we were, doing all the things you learn, all those things you learn to do in business school before you make a move. Well, when the pandemic comes, you just better make the move, right? So one of the things we have been thinking about was converting from a subscription program to a membership program. So we did that. We'd been thinking about whether or not it made sense to keep papers in the stores, especially in DC, where we have an office as well. And the pandemic said it was risky to have distributors on the street, and who knows when certain retailers would be open. So we pulled papers off of the street. You can only get a print copy if you're a member. You can get a digital copy, if you're a member as well, or you can go right now on afro.com and you can see some of the stories there, but members get full access. And so we did that, we pivoted that way. We had already converted everything to the cloud, come off of our server. We had done that before March 2020. So it was easier for us to telework. And then we decided, wait a minute, our lease is going to expire October 31st. Do we really need this office space with so many people teleworking? And we said, no, we don't need that. So we're going to go to a remote spaces down on Austin Street for the couple of essential folk that need to be there, because we received an award to develop a historic mansion here in Baltimore called the Upton Mansion in West Baltimore, where our future headquarters will be. And we said, you know what, we can stick this out without paying that expense until Upton is ready, which won't be for a couple of years. So we've done a whole lot of things over these last 6 months.
And so that people, there's business students here from in different spectrums of business, what is, so they've got kind of an idea just of what the dramatic change has been in the publication industry. I mean, what's the way your revenues have shifted? What's been the shift between, advertising revenue, I guess, which would be where the print would make most of the money, and digital, what is the shift?
The biggest shift is in rate. So the rate that you charge for a print advertisement is not the same as the rate that you charge for social media or for your website or for a podcast or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so your volume has to increase exponentially if you're talking about your bottom line profit in order to recoup, if you will, those same dollars. So one thing that a lot of publications have shifted to, including the Afro, is something called branded content. And so branded content says to a potential sponsor, branded and sponsored content, I'll use those interchangeably, but it'll say to a BGE for example, that we are doing this special around race equity. Is that something that's important to your company? And they said yes. And so we did a special edition called We're Still Here. We did 2 of those this summer. And the ad that they put in was not about utilities. It was about their stance, their public stance around race and racism. And also part of their branded content package included an article on what they were doing, what their CEO was doing, those types of things. And so it's a shift into and some people will still advertise their product and services, but it's a shift to branded and sponsored content. And that, I think, is the main difference. There's also a shift to philanthropy for-profit newspapers. That doesn't sound like it goes together, does it? But it does. Lots of foundations have messages that they want to get out, and they are sponsoring journalists, paying for journalists to cover those kinds of things on an investigative basis.
So more sponsors, so a lot more sponsored. No, quick question on this. You can tell the difference between the sponsored journalism and the open journalism?
You really ought to put a disclaimer that, so if a company sponsors content, it doesn't necessarily mean they control the content.
Right.
We still reserve the right to edit it, to control it, and to not put anything in there that's contrary. So it's not, it's so another, I'm trying to think of the sponsored content edition we did in July and another one in September. For example, I think this was still BGE's ad. We ran at the top of the page pictures of all of the people who had unfortunately been killed by police. And, that filled up like almost the whole page. But then that page was sponsored by someone. And so their name was there. During the pandemic, small businesses didn't have advertising dollars. We went to larger businesses and said, we want to give back to the community. We want to collect business cards from small businesses, but it costs for them to appear in the paper or to be on our social media sites, website as well. Would you sponsor them? So Kelly Services and someone else did that. So their names went on there, but it was a whole page or 2 of nothing but 2x2 business cards for people who didn't actually pay for that. So things like that.
So that actually, can lead to my next question. And this is a question that almost all of our speakers so far have sort of tried to address. So we're looking at the spectrum, and I'm very interested in Baltimore. When you look at the companies in the pandemic, which companies do you see as being successful at navigating or pivoting or reimagining, all these words that we were using before? Which ones do you see when you're looking out into the community, being successful, and those that you feel have struggled?
Well, so I think that there's some restaurants that fall in both categories. They've pivoted for the outdoor dining, many of them, but a lot of them were not able to do it. It just wasn't worth it. The volume was not there for their business. And it's going to be very, very difficult in these winter months to do that. I think some of the sports teams, especially if you look at the NBA, I think the NBA in the bubble was a pivot that worked well for them. Go Lakers! Any Lakers fans on it? No Lakers fans. Okay. So I think that they did better than MLB, and it looks like they're doing better than the NFL if you take a look at that. And they are a business, by the way. They're in the entertainment business.
Yeah, absolutely.
They are definitely in the entertainment business. Certainly those who provided, speaking of entertainment, things like concerts, they have not been able to do well during this particular economy. On a larger scale, the number one business is, they're not located here, but Amazon just keeps on pivoting. And since the pandemic, many of us are home, shopping online, and they're capitalizing on things like that as well. So those are just,
and in the neighborhoods, what's your view about the neighborhoods? Is this, during the pandemic, this has created further disparity in the Baltimore neighborhoods, or are there some neighborhoods that have been able to adapt better than others? Or
I think the neighborhoods that were already adapting well adapt better than those who were not adapting well. Does that make sense? I think that those neighborhoods that do not have the support that they need in Baltimore are not necessarily getting more support for that. Our unemployment rates have been high in Baltimore and throughout the state. The other thing that you see as an inequity, this is not necessarily, it is a business issue, but it's a little more hidden. The essential workers who have to go to work every day, that is a business. But we see, for example, in Baltimore City, in essential services like trash pickup. I'm a Baltimore City resident, recycling resident. Those things are all negatively impacted by COVID because people are working in close proximity one to another. We certainly have seen in the water billing department of our city that they're going to contract that out. And so I don't know what's going to happen to those people who are employed there. And so when you have fewer, I think our city government probably employs, not probably, it does employ quite a few people. And so that impacts people across. So I don't think it's even across the board. The people who usually can stay home are those who have professional jobs, as opposed to those who have to go to work every day. And I'm not saying that, and certainly doctors and those essential workers there, they have professional jobs. And I'm not saying they're not impacted. Everybody's impacted by this virus. One thing about the virus, not just on the economics, it doesn't know any color. It doesn't know age, it doesn't know any of that. It's a devastating virus that's impacting people across the board.
And here's my last, question. This is a good setting. Thank you. And so we can get into, groups can get into discussion. But the prognosis for Baltimore. Are we going to progress on a upward path, or are we on a downward path? How do you see this, and how do you see business, and the business community fitting into that prognosis?
I think it's a matter of perspective. I think it depends on what narrative you've already bought into. Have you bought into the narrative of The Wire? Have you bought into the narrative of some of the unkind tweets that people have made about Baltimore? What narrative have you bought into? As a native Baltimorean, and President Schmoke, as a native Baltimorean, and some of you, how many native Baltimoreans are on the line? Anybody that just, this Baltimore is your home. And how many of us, when we know Baltimore is our home, we see some things about Baltimore, we're like, what? Where did that come from? So if your perspective is that Baltimore is just in the toilet, if just no hope for Baltimore, crime is crazy, the people are whatever label people want to give us, right? So if you accept that, then your glass is always going to be half empty. But if you drive through Baltimore and notice that there are beautiful neighborhoods, there are people who care about Baltimore, we have to change our own narrative. And so Mayor Schmoke said Baltimore is a city that reads a long time ago. He also said legalize marijuana a long time ago. People are just getting around to it now. But if that's what you believe, it's in our belief system. And it's in what we say about Baltimore, and it's in what we see as possibilities. So one of the groups that I am a part of is called Results Baltimore. We believe that, that there are enough like-minded people who can see Baltimore, not as Baltimore used to be, but as what Baltimore can be. And we have to work, and we have to change our narrative. It's like your family. You might know some things about your family, but you don't want everybody talking about your family like that. But we have to work together, I think. And so University of Baltimore has always been central, really, and Baltimore centered to look at that. So your Baltimore Neighborhoods Initiative that's been going on, I think, for 20 years or so, and the things that you do. I don't think you could sustain a campus in downtown Baltimore if you didn't believe Baltimore could be better. And I don't think these students who are on here now and faculty members would waste your hard-earned tuition dollars going to a University of Baltimore if you didn't think Baltimore could be better.
Murray?
Yes, go on, Kurt.
Before we break, Toni, could you talk about the business of the church, how that's been affected by the pandemic? Because I know, religious organizations are really vital to the community. I'm sure they've been buffeted by this too. And I was wondering, from your perspective as a pastor of a church, maybe specifically yours and maybe generalized to what you're hearing in the rest of the religious community.
Okay, so one thing thank you for that question. One thing the pandemic has done is level the playing field. There are no big churches and little churches, right? They're big buildings and smaller buildings, but the opportunity to serve from the church perspective is magnified during this pandemic. And I think it shines a spotlight on those of us who pastor, those of us who go to synagogue or mosque or church, to really examine ourselves and say, okay, what are we really doing? Is everything contained within the four walls? If so, oh well, you can't do that. And so what are we really doing, and how are we impacting the community? And are we giving hope to people within the community? Is it just a one-time program, or is it really a lifestyle of service to the community? So for our church, for example, we would not be considered a mega church. We're a medium-sized church with about 250 people on the roll, and about half of those show up if we were at, on a Sunday morning. But what we did was we were already streaming our services before the pandemic. So we were already doing that. And then during the summer months, we actually went outside. We're fortunate. We're in Baltimore City, in South Baltimore. We're fortunate that we had a big enough space that we could be outside. Now in October 1, we've gone back in, but just with those who are part of service. But more importantly, it's not just about our church service. We have partnered. It's about partnerships. We've partnered with our neighborhood associations. We've partnered with our local school. We are feeding people. We're offering encouragement to people. We are praying with people just to try to be a support to our community. And we're not afraid to be out, properly masked and social distanced, to give a word of hope. So I hope that answers your question. And I think there are other churches too that are stepping up and doing some things. And I tell the people now, they look at me like a little side-eye. Listen, if you belong to a church and this last 6 or 7 months, they're not doing anything for the community. They're still waiting for church to open back up so they can have the next anniversary. You might want to, take a look at that and see if that's really the best place for you to, demonstrate your faith.
Now, I asked because I remember that back in the old days when I was mayor and there were snowstorms, pastors used to call me a lot and say, get those streets open because we need to get people in here for collections and paying bills and things like that. So I didn't know, just from a financial
from a financial standpoint for us, we see, my husband and I, we're the senior citizens in our church. We are. Well, we're the seniors in our church, and so we already had 4 ways people could give, through Zelle or PayPal or Cash App or Givelify. That was already there. We still had some people that wanted to, write a check or put not a dollar, but put something into the offering basket. But almost everybody now is giving electronically.
I see. Okay.
For our church. Now, I know that might not happen in every church, but we trend younger. I told you Murray told you my mother said, hang around with young people. So I took that to heart, because people my age, Kurt, your age, they just want to talk about what the ailments that they have. That's another whole discussion.
Right.
That's great. So we'll break into work groups now, and I do remind students particularly. Remember, I say this every week that beginning we were going to just split students to students, faculty to faculty, but we find we have some technical difficulties in doing that regularly. So everybody's mixed together, but this is not like a class. There's no grades here. And so your voice is equal. And if you end up with President Schmoke in your group, he's, you'll find he's equally willing to listen and talk. Okay. So and Toni, you'll randomly go to a group as well. And I'm just going to create that now. There'll be about 4 and 5. So we've got about 15 minutes. So quickly introduce yourselves, and then really what we want when you come back is for you to post questions, and we'll try and go through these before we break, okay? And continue this discussion. So remember, we're looking at business in the post-COVID world, okay? Thanks. You'll get sent in a second.
Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you? This is my cat George. He has joined us.
I understand. Mine was just on my back.
Very helpful. So
yes.
are the two of you students?
Yes, I am.
And tell me, are you incoming students? Where are you in your progress?
I'm a senior.
Okay.
I'm like I guess you can consider me maybe like a 3rd year senior. We're getting there.
Okay. Great. It matters that you're getting there. So I'm Amy. I am the dean's executive assistant. So it's so nice to meet the two of you.
Oh,
Yes, you as well.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. So what are your thoughts about today's topic and our guest, Reverend Toni?
She's very interesting.
In what way?
Well, the different things that she does, because I think it's hard enough to run, be in the journal, like journalism start, and then be in the church. I think it's like a nice contrast.
Yeah, I actually think that would be a really great question for you to post in the chat and to ask her, if she ever has any, how she balances those two things.
Yeah,
That would be a great question to ask her.
I can ask that.
Yeah, especially now, during, COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, there's, so many issues going on that are very important, that I'm sure she's dealing with firsthand.
Yes, that's true. Because exactly in both lives, because in journalism you talk about the news, and then in the church there are like the way she explains it, those part of Baltimore are like very Black communities, and so she deals with people that have lost people in police brutality and all that.
That's such a great point. Absolutely. Yeah. And so what are you studying? Are you
Accounting.
accounting? Okay. Yeah, great. So you have Professor Korb?
Yes, I have a class with him this semester, and Professor Williams.
Yeah, no, she's wonderful. Yeah. And Emily, what about you? What are you studying? Okay, maybe she's
I'm in business for human resources.
okay.
Yep.
Great. Have you had courses taught by Ted Peters?
No, he was actually supposed to be my professor this past semester, but since we had to do online, I switched majority of my classes to the actual online session, so I didn't have to meet via Zoom for 6 classes.
That's pretty intense.
But he was supposed to, but I have met him through another one of these Zoom sessions that I had in the past.
Okay. Yeah, he would be a great resource for you, for sure.
Yes, yep, I definitely have his contact information, and yep, he told me about everything.
Okay, good. And so, Emily, what are your thoughts about today's discussion and guest, Reverend Toni?
Hello?
Yeah, Emily, can you hear me?
Are you still there?
Yes.
Yes.
Emily?
I think I can. Hello?
Can you hear us? think-
Kind of, not too much.
Oh. So can you hear me right now, Emily?
I'm not sure what's, can you hear my name? Hello?
I think it's the
Are
internet.
you still there?
Yes, we're here. Let me check it. Mm, 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 mm.
Lala, is that how you pronounce your name? Is Lala?
Yes.
Okay. It's unfortunate that Emily isn't able to really hear us very well, but yeah, I'd be interested.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
It's gonna.
I don't know. I know it keeps going in and out. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm sorry. Hello?
It's okay. So, Emily, can you hear me? I was just wondering what your thoughts were about today's topic and the special guest.
I don't think she can hear.
I don't think so.
You were saying?
Yeah, what was I saying? um, um, so what profession are you, what do you want to do with your degree specifically?
So I just accepted a position as after graduation as a staff auditor. So that's what I'm going to do for now. And while I work and get my master's and get the CPA,
Okay.
then I mean I have intern in audit. I am looking to intern in taxes this December. So I'll see. So far I like audit, so I'll see what happens after that. But I think I'm going to do audit for a while.
Okay. It'll keep you busy.
Yeah.
And what company?
SBN company.
Oh yeah. So do you know Mina?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Mina was our grad assistant and who graduated this past May, and I totally adore Mina.
Yeah. Really nice.
Yeah, she's wonderful. Yeah. And so you know Renata Hirsch? Okay. I thought Renata had worked there at SB. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you working remotely?
Oh, I intern remotely now. So in this semester, I'm just taking classes, and I am a tutor at school. But I will start full time after I graduate.
Okay, that's great.
Oh yeah, I was just like, let me finish this and then start.
Yeah, yeah. And are you from here? Where are you from?
Mali, West Africa.
Okay, right. Yeah, I know you have a lovely accent.
Thank you.
I actually used to work in the Middle East for 20 years before I decided to stop traveling, and then I took 2 years off and decided to take a position that wasn't at an executive level, but I knew how to support an executive. So that's how I ended up with Dean DL. But yeah, that was a great, I was never in West Africa, but I wore the hijab and abaya. So, and I was always the most comfortable. Like,
That's nice. Where did you work?
so primarily in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE.
Do you speak Arabic?
I studied for 2 years, so shweya. I've lost a lot of it. Yeah, so my instructor was from Syria, so I ended up having like a Syrian accent. But gosh, I was more fluent in reading and writing comprehension of Arabic than the conversational Arabic, because
it's so
everyone I went, they all spoke English, you know, just like, so.
And plus it's very different because they have like they have 3 types of Arabic. They have street Arabic, they have Fusha Arabic, and then they have ancient Arabic. And every text different uses something different. And every country has different slangs.
Yes. And when I would try to converse in Arabic, people would laugh because they said I sounded like a 5-year-old.
It's funny because when I started, I mean, I'm still studying Arabic, but when I started studying Arabic, you know, some letters are different from, because I speak French.
Okay.
And Bambara, which is in Mali. So when I started studying Arabic, I had a problem with ha, the ain, before I got it right. And I was just like,
Yeah, I remember there was a point when I started dreaming in Arabic, and I asked my instructor if that counted as extra credit. He said no.
I think we have to go back now.
Me too. It was lovely meeting both of you. Emily, I hope that you can hear the rest, can engage in the rest of this. All right, Lala, take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Let's see if you will come back. Good. And we'll so start. If you've got questions that you want to address, you know, you can start posting them now. I'm going to keep looking. Okay. That's great. I can see most of you back. We actually ended up with more people back than left. So this is interesting. So good. So so please post you know, post questions, and we'll start. I'm going to be helped. If you know, Dean Allblack is going to. She's going to check that I'm actually looking at all the questions. Just make sure we cover people's questions today. So, and I know people want it a bit longer. Sorry about that. And we'll try and get this formula right. Okay. I do have a question. Just maybe so. Well, we got one here. I'll give audience questions first, and then I'll get to my question. This is a question about, you know, from a student. You know, what do you affect? You know, what do you think the effect on retirement plans will be? And do you think there will be a push, Toni, for companies not to deliver in an effort to recoup their losses, or to make up for lost revenue, I guess, or whatever? I mean,
Well, I think it depends. Yeah, I think it depends on the company, whether there'll be a push to recoup the losses. So so retirement plans that are tied into the market, for the most part, I believe that the market's going to rebound. Who knows when? But some things are doing better than others. It just depends on where it's parked, if you will. And so, you know, you have these fluctuations in the market that are sensitive to situations that you hope are not going to last forever. And in a good fund manager, they are taking that into account. We've had market fluctuations, and there's not been a pandemic. It's just been, today we didn't like that news. And so it goes, you know, it goes up and down that way. And so I'm hoping that that does not happen, especially for, those larger companies that have big, big retirement plans. And so we'll just, it's a shame to say this way, but you have to wait and see. It's just like you do with any other market fluctuation that's tied, and you have to wait and see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. And there's a sort of follow-on question from what we left just before the break in your response to President Schmoke. One group was curious about the possibilities of churches just moving away completely from brick and mortar, mm-hmm. and just in the way that that businesses in general have been, but they're not in agreement that it would be good that would be good, but and some churches are not as technically advanced. So how do you see that? Do you see there's going to just be a fundamental shift now in the way churches are going to be operating?
Okay, well, I want to answer this with this big Greek word called it's koinonia is the word, and koinonia is the Greek word for fellowship. And so while our online presence is growing because of the pandemic, it will not replace the fellowship. So people come to church for lots of reasons, and one is to be in community. Mm-hmm. And so to be in community, you cannot be in community over Zoom or whatever platform you choose to do. And I was telling our group, very challenging around children's ministry. And so there are people now who say, if you say, well, what church do you belong to? Well, they belong to Bedside Baptist. I rolled over. That was before the pandemic, right? Michael Brown said he knows something, not that he personally knows, but he's heard that term before, right? And so I go to Bedside Baptist, and I tell people, okay, when you go to Bedside Baptist, when you get sick, when someone dies, when you want somebody to marry you, call up the pastor of Bedside Baptist and see if they'll come. So if you're getting all of what you need from the television or from the computer, and you're just flipping from this person to that person, that's not a relationship. So it is as much about relationship with God and relationship with one another and being in koinonia with one another as it is coming into a building. If the building is your focus, you're off. But if fellowship and relationship is your focus, you're right on in the Christian faith. And I can only speak for the Christian faith there. That's not to say that there aren't people here who are other faiths or no faith. I'm just saying what sustains us.
That's good. Thank you. Now, there's a question about the nature of work. It's been asked by a labor economist, but there's several elements to this, and it's really about how work is going to change and how you see work changing. In some ways, that must have happened in the publishing business as well. But the impact of will these jobs that have transformed and are now telework jobs, will they continue to be telework jobs? I think that's one part of the question. Another part of the question is that some jobs that can't be done telework are often overlooked, that they can be, that they're transformed as more things are demanded on it. I know Brandon, student, works in retail, and we've talked about this but the pressures in retail, they're in fact have also probably increased over the last few years. So it's how work is really going to change. Are telework jobs going to always be telework jobs, and then for work it cannot be done telework? What do you see as the transformation there?
I don't think we can say at this point that anything will always be, including telework. I think telework protocols will have to be developed. There may be a whole class on that at UB. I don't know, because right now there's some companies like Verizon, for example, they've been teleworking for years. Not in the retail outlets, but in terms of some of the engineers, they've been teleworking for a long, long time. And so for some companies, they've been doing this. For other companies like ours, this is new. And because I'm a person that's more interested in productivity than in you punching a clock, if you get the work done, I don't care, really. I don't care when you do it, how you do it. And I'm trying to be respectful of the fact that I shouldn't be texting you at 11 o'clock at night. I'm trying to resist the urge to do that, because I think you can abuse people too. And you can allow yourself to be abused because you're teleworking and it's there. But I also want the flexibility. So if someone at the Afro says, you know what, Dr. Draper, I want to get my hair cut today. You know, if you're a reporter and you got your story in, go for it. I don't care. I'm not counting all those beans. I'm not a bean counter kind of person. But that doesn't work for every single industry. You can't telework every place. So I think for some companies, what I foresee is some kind of hybrid for many companies, where people who can telework will. I know it's been a blessing for the young mothers on our staff who were like really anxious around, oh my God, school's not going to open and I got 3 little kids at home and, you know, I don't have anybody to watch them type of thing. Can I do both? And we had one such employee who actually was coming into the office, but her kids were calling her all day long, Mom, I can't get on, I can't do this. And so I said, go home, take your computer and go home. As long as you get done what I'm asking you to do, you know, I don't care about that. So to answer your question, everybody can't telework. You're right. Some industries may not recover, unfortunately. But those who can telework, I'm just hoping that there'll be some protocols, because I think that our team members, the people that we work with, they deserve to know what the parameters are, even if you're flexible, that you think about that in your, when I was at UB, I was a management student. I don't know if they offer this track anymore. And human resources was really what my concentration was. So very in tune to people and how our practices and policies impact productivity. And I think that's going to be the same way with this, in this new reality we all find ourselves.
By the way, Amir just pointed out that Microsoft, you're very relevant, Microsoft just announced that employees have their option to work from home permanently now.
Wonderful.
So here's another question, a slight change, you know, a different change of pace, but going back to the discussion we had about Baltimore just before the break, you know, and really a 2-part question from the perspective of Baltimore. One question is, you know, how do we rebrand Baltimore on a larger scale, nationally or particularly? And then how do we combat the negative media that has caused the breakdown of some realistic perspectives about Baltimore? That's the question.
Well, I'll answer it somewhat. I don't have all the answers. I think, you know, we need to take stock of our assets. So whether you call it inventorying or asset mapping or whatever we want to call it, but we need to own our assets first. And we need to recognize that we are a city that has major educational institutions, major healthcare institutions. We have that. We have people who live here, who love it here, you know, pretty mild climate, if you will, great water views. I mean, we have to start naming our assets, right? And believing that for ourselves. I think it starts with individuals. I don't think that politicians can change how we feel about Baltimore. Now, having said that, we also should pay attention to the systems that work against those things, right? And what can I do as an individual to help impact a change in those systems? It's like systemic racism. If I allow that conversation to happen and I don't say anything about it, then I'm complicit, right? If it's a joke with my family behind doors and then it spills out to the street, then I'm responsible. So I'm responsible for what I say about Baltimore. And it doesn't mean I'm living in some kind of bubble and denial and don't recognize that Baltimore has problems. Every large metropolitan city has has problems, but I just believe that our assets, since we're talking to business students, I believe our assets outweigh our liabilities. And that when you want to balance that balance sheet, it comes in that whole goodwill line, right? What do I think about my city and or my region? And what am I willing to, find out about it? Where am I willing to invest my time, not somebody else's time? Where am I willing to volunteer to make it a better Baltimore for all? And if I want to drill down on that, make a better Baltimore for Black and brown people, because that's where the inequities lie. So we have to make up our minds that I'm going to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem.
And, I've got two questions to end. I just wanted a follow-up question that was way up before that I didn't get to, but I think the way I would express this is that, it sort of follows from this is a business school, and we're talking about business in the future. What caught my attention earlier when you were talking about was, how BG&E had taken out paid journalism in the face of, the other pandemic we faced that came to a height with the George Floyd tragedy. And I noticed you're running an article at the moment about how city has changed, and that city's got a very particular focus on capital that will cut over the race wealth divide. And so I'm wondering, perspective, are businesses doing, is this a turning point for businesses? And we've got the business leaders here of the future. What should we be encouraging businesses to drill down and do more of to keep that momentum going?
Well, first, I think we have to encourage businesses to be honest and take a look in the mirror and take a look at their own selves first. So if a business, in Baltimore, there's a lot of businesses. If I look in the mirror of my own business and I don't see anybody of color, I don't see any women in the boardroom, that's a problem. Because that speaks to the mindset of that business. That's the first thing you have to do. Take an introspective look and say, if I've got the same people who all look the same at this board table, things are not going to change because they don't change at the top. If I look at my C-suite and I don't see enough diversity in my C-suite, I have a problem. And if I recognize that most C-suite leaders come from the second in charge at most companies, and I get down to the second and third levels of that company and I don't see diversity, we're not going to change mindsets. Because what will happen sometimes is this welfare mentality. I'll do a handout, and a handout is not going to level the playing field. So that's what I think first businesses have to recognize. We have a lot of businesses in Baltimore that do very, very well, but we have a diversity problem in Baltimore City businesses. And even these small funds that are out that have come out recently to help small businesses, small so-called disadvantaged businesses, if you make more than $750,000 a year as a business, you don't qualify. That's not going to fix it. Those are micro businesses and they're necessary, but it's not going to create wealth. So I think the intentionality around equality has to be talked about, and that businesses have to be honest and open about what they really are going to do, not what they're going to give lip service to.
So thank you for that. Then this is the last question. I know we run over slightly, and by the way, this is we've set a record because we have more questions than we've been able to answer. We've been able to ask you within our time period. So I appreciate this. But always like our speaker to give some advice, particularly to the students, but faculty like to listen to that as well because they've got to be mindful of it. But particularly in the discussion we've been having about our community and as well as business, what would your advice to students be? I mean, what would you suggest that they've been doing going out in their community, and who should they be referring to in order to do that well?
So I'm not familiar with the current profile of University of Baltimore students, but as I said earlier, at least when I was there, I know that was 100 years ago, but when I was there, these we were mostly working students with families. Is that still the profile that they're?
Absolutely, yes.
So you are the students who you get things done because you don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't have it. I mean, you're budgeting time. You're trying to figure out how you're gonna get that paper in before, the professor says, no, not gonna take it any longer. And so you're juggling all kinds of things trying to get it done, which means that you are probably the most productive students, really, because you have learned how to juggle so much. So for me to make this suggestion next, you probably say, what? But find something that you're passionate about and volunteer for it. Give something back even while you're in school. Mentor somebody. Find something you can do even if it's online, but some way that you give back to community around something that you're passionate about. And if there's a disconnect between that and what you're studying, reassess why you're studying what you're studying so that it doesn't become drudgery. Well, I took this because I thought I was going to get a good job. Wrong answer. For me, that's just the wrong. Do what you are passionate about. You all have heard this. You're in business school. Do what you love. The money will follow. I really believe that. And so that's two pieces of advice I would give. Give back and do what you love. And it's not too late to change. It's not too late to pivot. It's nothing, I think, more dissatisfying than to talk, for me personally, to talk to people who have done what you've done. The amount of money that you spent for this degree, wow, even if you had some help, and then to finish and say, you know what, I really didn't like finance anyway. Doesn't that seem like a waste of time? I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't do the entrepreneurial track. I did the safe things so I could get a job. You'll be miserable. So do something that you really like to do.
That's great. I really appreciate it. We'll give you a kind of a virtual round of applause, and it's
My pleasure.
And I did see a comment there from Tina Smith who said that her group just won, and I think this applies to everybody. Just wanted to say how much they admire, how much you care about the community and everyone's well-being. I mean, that really came out. So and I think we have I know that we have a sort of common mission. President Schmoke always reminds us that we're not only the University of Baltimore, we're the University for Baltimore. So it's wonderful having graduates such as yourself, and continue to do great things in the community. So thank you very much.
You're so welcome. And thank you for allowing me to live out my passion. I have passion around community, and I think President Schmoke knows this. I've taught in business school at Morgan. I have passion about community, and I have passion about teaching. So thank you, and sharing. So thank you for allowing me to talk about both of those today.
Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Now, our next session, next week, I'm not going to have a guest speaker. Still have a session, and it's going to be much more informal. I felt that maybe some of you were getting a little zoomed out, classes and things like that. So I'll have a little bit of a break, but I invite you all to come back. We'll do a little bit more social. I'll ask some serious questions, but I'm going to quickly break you into groups and then give you a longer time to talk and come back with some observations, and we can discuss that. The week afterwards, October 27th, we do have another guest. It's Heather McMahon, who was here earlier. I think she had to go to, I think Heather had to go to a meeting, but now Heather she's a Department of Defense executive who's currently detailed to the President's Intelligence Advisory Board. So she's a counterintelligence and a national security expert, and she's got a particular. This is going to be very different. She's got a very, very particular interest in strategic supply chains, and which is and that her interest has actually increased since the COVID. So the pandemic hit. So I think this will be a very interesting and a very different type of a perspective on supply chains, business risk, international relations. She's not a political appointee, I should say, in the White House. She's a former, she's a West Point graduate, former serving officer, as well as being a national security expert. So she's so I think this will be a very interesting perspective. So I invite you all to come back, and but next week hopefully I'll see you again, and we'll have we'll keep this discussion going and keep the connection going. So want to be safe and be well. And again, Toni, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Okay,
Go to
bye.
AFRO.com and become a member.
You should.
That's my commercial.
Yes. I advocate it. Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.